Right, let's move to a story now that's perhaps yet another sign of urban decay in Johannesburg and an erosion of part of our city heritage and our memories. The ash walls, which are part of the Braamfontein Cemetery, have been completely vandalised. Urns broken open, ashes scattered, plaques ripped from walls and broken. Now, I'm joined now by Sarah Welham, who is part of the group Friends of Johannesburg Cemeteries. They, of course, help city parks in keeping graves in good condition. Sarah, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about this. When I saw the pictures of this wanton destruction, I mean, it's quite horrifying because, you know, a cemetery is meant to be a place of quiet reflection. Often people are in very deep emotional states of sorrow when they go there. And if we look at those pictures now being placed on the screen, I mean, it's really quite awful. Just as we look through these pictures, just tell us a little bit more about what the ash walls are and how it actually works.
Cremations in Johannesburg used to happen at Brixton Cemetery initially, and then only in the 1930s did they put up the crematorium in Braamfontein Cemetery. So initially it was just a balambra tree and people used to scatter their ashes there. And then they started building these low walls. They've got a ditch in them. You put the casket with the ashes into the ditch and then you put a plaque over the top, as you can see on the pictures.
So this has been going on, these walls, from about the 1930s, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about why would someone do this? Do you have any idea why someone might have done this?
There are various theories. We wonder whether perhaps it's the Niobe smokers. They used to use rat poison, but that was quite expensive. They mixed that into their smoking mixture. And then they found that the cemeteries had ashes readily available, so they preferred to mix that into their smoking mixture. It could be them raiding for the ash.
I mean, these are ashes of human remains.
Yeah. But it doesn't look like it's them in this case because a lot of the ashes have been left in the walls. They haven't taken them all for some reason. So it could be just the act of vandalism. Somebody came in, a group came in, and maybe they were high on something and they decided to just wreck the place. Or it could be people who believe that perhaps you get buried, your ashes get buried with sentimental, valuable items, gold rings, jewelry, money, and maybe they're looking for those.
Tell us a little bit more about the Braamfontein Cemetery. I mean, I think it's probably most famous for the memorial to Enoch Sontonga, who wrote Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. But tell us a little bit more about the cemetery and the cemetery's history, because as with apartheid, people of different colours were buried in different parts of the cemetery.
The first cemetery in Joburg was right in the middle of town, near the Home Affairs building. It was 4 city blocks, and they soon realized that Joburg was going to grow, so they had to move out to what they thought was going to be a nice quiet part of the edge of town, and that was Braamfontein. In 1888 it was opened, and different religious groups were given their sections. So you have the Anglican section, the Roman Catholic, the General, which covers most others. And then there was the Muslim section, the Jewish section, and the black section. And people were buried in those sections.
And the ash walls, I mean, this would have started in the 30s, you say. Was there any sort of segregation of who was buried at the ash walls?
There were no black people because I don't think they believed in cremation at that time. So they are mainly white people. And there are a few Jewish people, because I understand the Reformed Jews allow cremation. So you do come across the odd one. Yeah.
So this destruction that we've seen, I mean, I've been looking at your Facebook posts, and there are people saying, you know, my son died in 1983. His ashes were interred here. They've been completely destroyed. I'm absolutely heartbroken. So there's a huge sense of individual loss for grieving families, which is bad enough. But there's also a fair amount of history with some of these ashes. Just take us through some of the more sort of historical figures that have their ashes interred there.
The first one that comes to mind is Sonia Schlesen, who was Gandhi's private secretary. And it was such a thrill when we found her because we weren't expecting it. She was a very quiet person, unassuming, so we were very excited about that. And another prominent person was the author, Hedley Chilvers. He wrote Out of the Crucible and various other historical books on Johannesburg. So that was quite exciting to find him. There are a lot of the early architects in the ash graves. There's James Gray, who, with his wife, wrote the Gray Papers, which have become a source of, for researchers, it's a source of immense information and wealth of data. And he's there, which is very exciting.
And were any of those destroyed?
James Gray, his ashes were disturbed, yeah. Okay. I haven't looked at Sonia's yet, but yeah, it's just a question of time before we have a good look at everything.
Now, you are part of an organisation, it's a voluntary organisation that essentially makes sure that these graves are tended, and you go to various cemeteries. Is this sort of vandalism happening in other cemeteries, and this neglect?
It was of a different kind in Brixton Cemetery. There we had vagrant people actually living in the cemetery, and the type of destruction that we had there was building their little homes over the headstones and then lighting fires against the headstones so that they were completely illegible. You couldn't read what the inscriptions were anymore. There was no regard for, the dead people and the families who might be coming to visit. So that was a different kind of vandalism. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about city parks. I mean, they are ultimately the caretakers of this. What have they done to stop this sort of vandalism?
I reported it to them on the 13th of March when I took an American woman to go and fetch her father's ashes out of the wall. And that was the first time I saw a wall which had had all its plaques removed. Very distressing for her. And I wrote immediately to City Parks, and I got an apology from the general manager saying he's terribly sorry that she had to go through that. And then nothing, absolutely nothing.
So no attempts to secure the area since then?
Nothing.
So as we speak tonight, I know you've been trying to do a clear-up, but someone could access the cemetery and create even more destruction?
Absolutely. There's no temporary measure being put in place. There's nothing. They could move in and finish off all the walls that they haven't done yet.
What is City Park's explanation for not doing anything about this?
They never say. They never say.
Well, we're going to try and get them on to find out what they're going to do about safeguarding our heritage and the memories of many people in Johannesburg. And thank you for the work that you do in trying to preserve these groves and for bringing this issue to light. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sally.
Sarah Welham is part of the group Friends of Johannesburg Cemeteries. They've recently found that the ash walls in the Braamfontein Cemetery absolutely destroyed by vandals. So really very worrying story indeed. But